The marble island gleamed like a trophy under the recessed lights. Sienna Blake's kitchen looked like something from a design magazine, brushed gold fixtures, quartz waterfall edges, the faint smell of peonies and burnt vanilla diffusers. Every surface screamed effortless luxury, though I knew better now. I stood beside my husband, Gavin Rhodes, while Sienna poured wine into crystal glasses, her movements smooth, rehearsed. Her husband, Mark, hovered awkwardly by the sliding doors, watching the rain smear against the glass. The four of us an audience too polite for the show about to start. Gavin's hand pressed lightly on my back, the cue I'd been dreading all day. His voice, low and diplomatic, like he was moderating a panel instead of cornering his wife. Evelyn. We're all here because what you said last week really hurt Sienna's feelings. I think she deserves an apology. A real one. Sienna looked at me with that half-pained, half-triumphant expression women like her wear when they believe they've won something invisible. She was dressed in cream silk, the kind that doesn't wrinkle no matter how long you sit down. I smiled, the kind of smile that makes people step closer because they can't tell if it's genuine. Of course, I said softly. Sienna, I owe you an apology. The air shifted relief from Gavin, satisfaction from Sienna, confusion from Mark. I let it breathe for a heartbeat, long enough for everyone to believe I was surrendering. Then I finished the sentence. For not noticing sooner that my marital funds paid for your waterfall island. The words hit like porcelain cracking on tile. Sienna blinked once, twice. Mark's brow furrowed. Gavin froze. What Sienna's voice came out a pitch higher than usual. I placed a clear folder on the counter, sliding it across the marble. Inside, under the soft kitchen lighting, 3 papers gleamed with corporate neatness the operating agreement for Bailey Holdings, LLC, a wire transfer of $42,000 from our joint account, and an escrow holdback letter signed by a contractor whose invoices matched this very kitchen. You asked for transparency, I continued, my tone still even. So here it is. The documents are color-coded for convenience. Sienna didn't touch the folder. She just stared at it like it might detonate. Mark moved closer, his hand brushing the cover page, eyes scanning the header. Gavin, this is your signature. Gavin's face went pale, the practiced calm slipping like wet paint. Evelyn, what are you doing? He demanded, voice sharp. I turned to him slowly, fulfilling your request. Silence pooled around us, thick enough to hear the hum of the refrigerator and the rain outside. Sienna tried to recover, her laugh brittle. This is some kind of misunderstanding. Gavin was helping me with a business venture Mark's head lifted, a business venture that wired $42,000 into our renovation account. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Gavin stepped forward, palm open as if he could smooth the air. Evie, this isn't the time. You're making a scene. I met his eyes, calm and steady. The time, Gavin, was months ago, when you created an LLC with your best friend and funneled joint savings into her property. Tonight is just documentation. Mark exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting between us. The folder lay open now. A silent witness, black ink, signatures, account numbers, truth. No one moved. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass like a countdown. Sienna's voice broke the quiet, trembling but defensive. You're twisting things. Gavin was helping us get a loan. Mark's credit wasn't don't. Mark cut her off. His voice was low, cracked with disbelief. Don't make this about me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Gavin's composure snapped. Enough. Evelyn, you came here to apologize, not to play detective. I tilted my head. You're right. I did come to apologize. My tone stayed measured, almost gentle. I'm sorry I assumed betrayal only looks like lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it's hidden in escrow forms. Sienna's eyes filled, not with guilt, but with fury, the kind that comes when someone ruins your illusion in front of witnesses. Mark stepped back, folding his arms like he needed distance to breathe. I gathered the folder, tucking it back into my bag. Don't worry, I said, my voice barely above the hum of the storm. You'll each receive digital copies for your records. I believe in paper trails. Mark let out a quiet, stunned laugh, the kind that sounded more like exhaling grief. Gavin reached for me, his tone urgent. "We're leaving." "Good idea." I slipped my coat from the chair, buttoning it with deliberate precision. "But before we go, I should note Bailey Holdings filed its last amendment 3 days ago. That means the IRS and your compliance department will receive matching notifications soon. You might want to explain it to them before they ask." Sienna's hand flew to her mouth. Gavin's turned to stone. Mark's voice was the one that broke the silence this time, rough and hollow. "I think you should go." I nodded once, calm. We were just leaving. As I passed Sienna, her perfume something expensive and citrusy clung to the air. She whispered, "You've destroyed everything." I stopped at the door. "No," I said, turning slightly, meeting her eyes. "I just showed you the receipt." The storm outside swallowed the rest. If you were forced to apologize for telling the truth, would you stay quiet or bring the paper? The view from our living room looked like a painting rows of pastel Victorian townhouses stacked neatly against the fog. The bay glimmering beyond the rooftops, on clear mornings. I could see the Golden Gate like a thin red brush stroke across the horizon. People said Gavin and I lived the dream, a dual-career couple who ran our lives like a spreadsheet salaries matched. Chores rotated, even groceries split down to the cent. And for a long time, I believed that balance meant security. My name is Evelyn Hart Lewis, 34. Real estate contract analyst for Haven West Development, one of San Francisco's biggest property groups. I specialize in the fine print, the zoning easements, transfer deeds, escrow writers that no one reads but everyone signs. The quiet side of real estate where legality meets language. Gavin Rhodes. My husband. Works upstairs in the same glass tower as a senior project manager, the charismatic face clients remember when they leave our sleek conference rooms. He has a reputation for turning chaos into charm, which makes him valuable. It also makes him magnetic. We met 6 years ago at a project kickoff for a luxury condo tower in Soma. I was the one correcting clauses. He was the one presenting renderings. He called my attention to detail sexy, and I should have known then that confidence like his came from being adored often. But I fell anyway. His world was all glass and light and praise. I thought I was lucky to be invited in. Now, 5 years into marriage. We lived in a meticulously renovated Pacific Heights townhouse, 3 stories of clean lines and engineered calm. The kind of place that photographed well. The kind of place that said successful couple. Friends envied how synchronized we looked, his gray suit beside my ivory blazer, our matching electric bikes in the garage. Everything was curated, even our marriage. Gavin Rhodes was the talker, I was the listener. He filled rooms effortlessly, every sentence polished for presentation. When people asked how we managed working for the same company without friction, he'd smile and say, "Transparency is everything." And I believed him. That transparency, though, had small blind spots, tiny omissions that, on their own, seemed harmless late texts from team dinners, quick calls answered in the hallway, urgent PR discussions with Madeline Shaw, our firm's PR director. Madeline had joined Haven West 2 years ago, during a rebrand that Gavin Rhodes led. She was brilliant at what she did, the kind of woman who understood how to make investors feel like visionaries and journalists feel like insiders. Mid-30s. Tall. Effortlessly stylish in monochrome suits and low. Expensive perfume. Gavin Rhodes said they worked well together because she spoke fluent chaos. At company events. They were always in sync. I'd see them standing just close enough to look conspiratorial, sharing laughter that never quite reached me. At dinners. He always invited her. She knew exactly how close to stand without crossing a line. One evening at a company gala, I remember watching Gavin Rhodes and Madeline across the ballroom. He was leaning in as she adjusted the mic for a speech, his hand lightly resting at her back, professional. Technically, but his smile lingered a second too long. When she began her toast about partnership and trust, her eyes flicked toward him, and he lifted his glass. That was the moment I realized what subtle infidelity looks like. It doesn't start with physical touch. It starts with shared language phrases and glances that no one else can translate. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I had learned that in corporate life and in marriage, confrontation without evidence just makes you look emotional. And emotions, especially from women in my field, are rarely forgiven. So I compartmentalized. at home. Our lives ran like clockwork. Every morning, Gavin Rhodes would hand me my coffee with oat milk and a smile that looked the same as the one in our wedding photos. He'd leave for work 15 minutes before me, always with the same kiss on the forehead and the same phrase, "We're lucky." You know that, and I did know, or I wanted to. Our colleagues called us the Lewises, like a brand. When we walked into meetings, people straightened their posture. When we closed a deal. Our names appeared side by side in the internal newsletter, on the surface. We were flawless, a joint success story the firm liked to showcase. Until small cracks appeared in the gloss. A misplaced email with dinner recap delete after reading. A lunch charge on our joint card at Astor, the restaurant Madeline loved. A weekend conference in Napa that only 2 team members attended, Gavin Rhodes and Madeline. Each instance was minor. Explainable. But patterns rarely announce themselves all at once. They whisper, accumulating like dust until you finally see the layer of it covering everything. And still, I said nothing. Because the truth is, I wanted to believe that Gavin Rhodes' loyalty was as structured as our budget, as documented as the contracts I reviewed every day. I wanted to believe we were the exception, the modern marriage that survives ambition. So I signed the escrow for our next investment property, smiled for photos at Madeline's birthday dinner, and told myself I was overreacting. But beneath the calm, something in me had already started building a quiet file, a habit from work. Mental folders labeled inconsistencies, transactions, timelines. Because even when you love someone, part of you keeps receipts. And someday, when the paper trail leads somewhere you can't ignore, you follow it. It started with something so small, I almost dismissed it. Gavin changed the Face ID on his phone. We'd shared the same security access for years, our digital lives intertwined through convenience more than secrecy. But one Thursday morning, as I reached for his phone to silence the alarm, the screen flashed, "Face not recognized." "New update," he said, slipping it from my hand too quickly. "Apple's been glitchy with the shared ID thing?" I nodded, but something in his tone, light, almost rehearsed, stayed with me longer than it should have. That night. He set the phone face down on the nightstand. It glowed once, a soft light beneath the silence, then dimmed. I stared at the faint outline of the case and felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, distance, disguised as privacy. Then came the album. A week later, while transferring photos for our firm's client dinner slideshow, I noticed his iCloud folder had changed. The old work receipts album where he usually stored project expenses and invoices was gone. In its place was a locked folder labeled Receipts with a small gray padlock icon. When I asked, he didn't even look up from his laptop. Company audit stuff. Confidential. He said, "You know how compliance is?" I did. But I also knew compliance didn't require midnight secrecy or new passwords. Still, I said nothing. I logged it away quietly, mentally, like adding a tab in a spreadsheet labeled Behavioral Anomalies. Then one night, my phone lit up at 12:17 a.m. It was Sienna. Video call. Her thumbnail preview filled the screen, dimly lit room, wine glass visible beside her, hair undone, eyes glossy. I hesitated before answering. Gavin stirred beside me. "Hey, everything okay?" I whispered. Her tone was a blend of breathless and performative. "Sorry to wake you." "Eve, there's a PR crisis with the vendor coverage. We need Gavin's input before morning. Now it can't wait." "Could you wake him?" I didn't move. "It's almost midnight. "Sienna." "Right. But it's urgent," she said, flashing a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He told me to call if anything came up. You know how fast things move in PR?" Before I could respond, Gavin sat up, blinking, already reaching for his phone. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just took it from my hand and walked into the hallway, through the slightly open door. I could hear his low voice, calm and steady, the same tone he used in boardrooms. "Yeah, I'm here. No, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out tomorrow. You did great. See?" I stared at the crack of light under the door until it vanished. By morning, he was cheerful again, as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, kissed my temple, and left for work wearing his problem-solver smile. I told myself it was harmless, professional, nothing more. That married professionals could have midnight calls about urgent projects. that maybe I was reading into things that didn't deserve meaning. Then came the delivery. A week later. I arrived home from a long day at the firm to find 3 heavy boxes stacked neatly by our front porch. Each box had the same return label Stone and Bloom Interiors. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the recipient line. Bailey Holdings, LLC, our address. The handwriting Gavin's signature pen strokes was unmistakable on the delivery note. Inside were marble tile samples, pendant lights, and a small invoice taped to the top box. Custom quartz installation, $42,000 shipping confirmation enclosed. I froze. The marble calicata with champagne undertones matched the island in Sienna's kitchen. The same island I'd later stand beside, folder in hand. I texted Gavin package came for Bailey Holdings. Should I hold it for delivery? He called within seconds, his tone too casual. Ah, yeah, that's for a model home project I'm helping with. You can just leave it in the garage. Model home? Yeah, just a small investment thing. Don't worry about it. Bailey Holdings. I repeated. That's new. He paused just long enough for me to hear the gears turning. It's a developer entity. Nothing shady. I promise. You'll see returns soon. Returns. The word didn't match the tone. That night, while he showered, I searched the California Secretary of State's online database. Bailey Holdings LLC existed, filed 6 months ago. The listed members Gavin Rhodes and Sienna Blake. No mention of me. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. My reflection in the dark laptop glass looked calm, too calm. Later, as I folded laundry in the quiet living room, I found Sienna's message still unread on our shared group chat. A photo of countertop samples, captioned, "Our project. Baby needs the quartz by Friday." I stared at the heart emoji, that soft, decorative punctuation after deceit, when Gavin came home. His mood was lighter than usual, almost rehearsed. He spoke in numbers now 40, 50,000 as if affection had turned into accounting. He didn't notice me watching. In law and real estate, patterns tell the truth long before people do, and right then. The pattern was loud, hidden accounts, shared LLCs, private calls at night, all dressed in professional language, but confrontation is a poor weapon without documentation. So, I did what I do best. I took notes, dates, times, delivery tracking numbers, every phrase he used that didn't quite fit. I started keeping screenshots not because I wanted to catch him, but because my mind needed proof that it wasn't inventing things. Sometimes justice starts as self-preservation. And as I tucked another printed invoice into a folder marked Bailey, I realized that the line between marriage and merger had blurred completely. Whatever Gavin was building with Sienna, it was real and it had my signature on the funding. The first real crack in Gavin's perfect story didn't come from suspicion, it came from a typo. It was a Thursday morning, gray light filtering through the blinds, the kind of quiet that feels harmless until it isn't. I was sipping coffee and scanning through client contracts when my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "DocuSign consent to assign membership interest. Bailey Holdings LLC." For a moment, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the sender our firm's escrow partner. Larson Title Group and the recipient list Gavin Rhodes and Evelyn Rhodes. I blinked. The system had seeded the wrong Evelyn me instead of someone else. 1 letter difference. Inside the email. The body was brief. Impersonal attached, please find the consent form for transfer of 50% membership interest in Bailey Holdings LLC, per prior agreement between G. Rhodes and S. Blake. Please sign and return before Friday EOD. My name wasn't supposed to be there, but fate or a software algorithm had other plans. The PDF opened without a password. My legal training kicked in automatically, suppressing the wave of disbelief rising in my chest. The operating agreement was cleanly formatted standard Delaware LLC language, but one clause caught my eye. Section 4.2, Capital Contribution. The member G. Rhodes agrees to fund the initial capital contribution of $42,000 toward renovation expenses incurred at 1180 Union Street, San Francisco. C.A. My throat tightened. 1180 Union Street, Sienna's address. My pulse slowed to something unnatural. That wasn't emotion, it was instinct. the kind that lawyers develop when numbers and names stop being coincidences. I closed the email quietly, forwarded it to my work inbox for later reference, then deleted the notification before Gavin could see it on the shared iPad. By noon, I was on the San Francisco Building Department website, typing the address into the public permit lookup within seconds. The records appeared: permit Cheers 24 384, issued to Bailey Holdings LLC, scope kitchen remodel, replace island structure, electrical upgrade, new pendant lighting, imported quartz installation, contractor East Bay Build and Design, East Bay Build and Design. The same name printed on the invoice I'd found taped to those marble sample boxes weeks ago. It was no longer suspicion. It was a structure, a design. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the monitor as the evidence began stitching itself together like a blueprint. A company co-owned by Gavin and Sienna, a renovation permit filed under that company's name, a payment amount that matched a model home investment, and an invoice from a contractor I'd already seen delivered to our house. I wanted to believe there was some innocent business explanation. I even tried writing one down, the way I'd analyze a client dispute. Hypothesis: Gavin invested in Sienna's property as a short-term flip. Hypothesis B: Sienna handled design costs. Gavin provided funding. Hypothesis C: the gifted PR rate she bragged about online wasn't a discount. It was laundering through a narrative. I didn't need to finish the list. The truth was already obvious. That evening, while Gavin was on a late call, I opened our joint American Express statement. The familiar spreadsheet of expenses stared back: groceries, gas, dining out. Then one entry caught my eye: Studio Arroyo, $3,900, a home design showroom in the Design District. Date 2 weeks ago. I clicked through to their website. Their most recent Instagram post appeared instantly: an artfully staged kitchen island made of imported champagne quartz. The caption read, "New installation for our favorite PR client. Gifted rate for a glowing partnership. Sienna Blake Interiors. Bailey Project." The photo showed the same pendant lights I'd seen in Sienna's kitchen the night of the apology. She tagged Gavin in the comments. My coffee went cold. People lie. Paper doesn't. I printed the documents and laid them under the soft light: clean, clinical, undeniable. In law, there's a principle called corroboration by circumstantial evidence. No single piece proves guilt. But when the pieces fit together so seamlessly, intent becomes self-evident. That's what I saw now: a pattern that wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was financial misconduct. He hadn't just lied about loyalty, he'd used our joint marital assets to improve another woman's home and disguised it behind LLC filings, expense codes. And PR invoices? Gavin's genius wasn't love. It was plausible deniability when he came home that night. I watched him hang his jacket and ask about my day like nothing had changed. I nodded, smiled faintly, and said, "Busy, but productive." He didn't notice the papers now tucked neatly in a folder beside my work laptop. "Dinner?" he asked. "Leftovers," I said softly. He kissed my cheek before heading upstairs, and I let him. The smell of whiskey lingered, warm and deceptive. Once I heard the shower running. I opened my phone and took photos of every page. Then, on instinct, I uploaded them to a private folder in my cloud drive titled Bailey Bekdika's Evidence. Not revenge, not yet, just insurance, from that night on. The silence between us changed texture. It wasn't tension anymore, it was data collection. Every late meeting, every expense, every glance at his locked phone became an entry in a growing record of quiet betrayal. He thought the game was still about emotions. He didn't realize I'd switched to documentation, because love might forgive. But paper remembers. By the time February rolled in, the fog over the bay looked heavier than usual, thick, metallic, like it was holding secrets. I'd stopped asking Gavin about his late nights, not because I believed his answers, but because I'd learned something more valuable than confrontation: silence buys time. And time, when used correctly, builds cases. I didn't call a therapist or a friend. I called Marjorie Quinn, my boss at the firm, and one of the most brilliant estate attorneys in Boston before she semi-retired to teach the next generation of women not to get blindsided by paperwork. I walked into her corner office on a quiet Wednesday morning, closing the frosted glass door behind me. She glanced up from her screen. "You look like someone who found a codicil in her prenup." "Close," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Can I ask something?" "Off the record?" Her eyes sharpened. "Always?" I told her everything but clinically, like a paralegal presenting a fact pattern. The LLC. The permits? The Amex charge. The DocuSign email that wasn't meant for me. I didn't use words like betrayal or infidelity. I used words like asset diversion, co-mingling of funds. Unauthorized transfer? Marjorie listened without interrupting, her pen tapping a slow rhythm against her legal pad. When I finished, she nodded once. First rule. Evelyn, do not confront him until your documentation is airtight. Anger ruins leverage. I'm not angry, I said quietly. Her smile was small and knowing. Of course you're not. You're cataloging. She told me keep everything. Verify ownership, trace the money, and stay invisible until the story tells itself. Do you think he's stupid enough to leave a trail, I asked. Everyone leaves a trail, Marjorie said. Especially men who think they're smarter than their wives. That night, I opened my laptop and sent a letter of inquiry to Redwood Escrow, referencing the escrow holdback I'd seen in the DocuSign file. I framed it as a compliance clarification request routine. Harmless. Professional. By morning. I had a reply from an assistant per your request. The $42,000 holdback is still pending release to Bailey Holdings, LLC, awaiting completion certification from contractor East Bay Build and Design. Pending release. Not refunded, not canceled. Meaning the account still existed. The paper was still alive. I cross-referenced the details through the UCC filings database. Within minutes, I found it as security interest filed under Bailey Holdings, LLC, collateral listed as fixtures and improvements at 1180 Union Street, filed by Redwood Escrow, signed by Chias Rhodes. He had literally pledged our money to secure improvements on Sienna's property. I sat there, motionless for a long time. The house was silent except for the sound of Milo's slow breathing at my feet. Outside, the cable car bell rang faintly in the distance. I wasn't done. The next afternoon, I made a stop at the HOA management office in Pacific Heights. I'd brought cookies. Never underestimate the power of baked goods in bureaucratic settings. The manager, a cheerful woman named Renee, remembered me. You're Mrs. Rhodes, right? Love your hydrangeas. Trying to keep them alive, I said lightly. Quick question, I saw some HOA notices about late-night construction penalties. Is that common lately? She rolled her eyes. Oh, yes. One property on Union Street's been a nightmare. Bay Something Holdings contractors working past noise curfew neighbors complained for weeks. But it's wrapped up now, I think. My stomach tightened. Union Street. You said. She nodded. Lovely kitchen. Though, I saw photos in the permit file. Quartz Island. Pendant lights, gorgeous work. Of course she did. By Friday, the pieces were lining up too neatly. The final confirmation came from my friend Tara, HR business partner at Haven West. She'd always been the firm's quiet vault of gossip and policy enforcement. We were having lunch in the company cafe, our conversations low and coded. I'm asking this as a friend. I began carefully. Has there been anything off with vendor payments, particularly PR-related? Tara's brow furrowed. Funny you ask. Gavin flagged a new vendor bonus last quarter, PR support services. He called it. He personally co-signed the reimbursement for Madeline's department. Madeline, I asked, pretending to play dumb. Tara leaned in. Actually, it wasn't processed through her cost center. It went to an external PR contractor under Bailey Holdings, LLC. I asked finance about it. He said it was part of a cross-promotional strategy and told me to drop it. Her eyes softened when she saw my face. Is this about you two? No, I said, lying smoothly. Just a compliance audit. That night, I placed all the new evidence into the folder. The escrow letter confirming the holdback, the UCC filing printout, HOA violation records, Tara's text confirming the PR support entry. When I looked at it all together, it no longer looked like an affair. It looked like a scheme, a quiet siphoning of shared marital assets, dressed up as a business partnership. When I confronted Gavin, it wasn't yelling, it was methodical. He was at the counter, polishing his glass of bourbon when I asked, "Why is our escrow account connected to a company you co-own with Sienna?" He blinked. "Slow and practiced. You're overanalyzing again. It's a business loan." "Evie, I helped her refinance her place. She has terrible credit after her divorce by forming an LLC together." He smiled thinly. "It was cleaner that way, tax efficient. You'd understand if you weren't so emotional about this." "Emotional?" I repeated. The word felt sharp in my mouth. "You've got to stop letting paranoia cloud your judgment," he said, setting the glass down. "Sienna's like family. I did what any friend would do." "No," I said softly. "You did what any man would do when he thinks his wife won't notice the fine print." He laughed then, the kind of dismissive sound people make when they believe they've won an argument. But I wasn't arguing. I was archiving. After he went to bed, I emailed Marjorie Stage 1 complete, evidence intact, proceeding with preservation. I didn't need to say more, because by now, this wasn't just a marriage anymore. It was a case file. When people get cornered, they don't always lie, sometimes. They tell you just enough of the truth to make you doubt yourself. Gavin called it a business misunderstanding. I called it a performance. It happened 3 days after our confrontation. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, he'd been unusually attentive since offering to cook. Suggesting we reconnect, I let him, because contrition is often the best time to listen. We sat at the dining table, the same table where my folder of evidence had once lived, now replaced with a vase of white tulips he'd brought home. He reached across, his voice gentle, calculated. "Evie," he began, "I know I've made things look worse than they are." "That's one way to put it," I said evenly. He sighed, fingers interlaced. "I should have been honest from the start." "Yes. I helped Sienna finance her house, but it's not what you think." I stayed silent. Silence always makes people explain more than they intended. Mark, her husband, got into trouble last year. Gambling debts. He had a lien placed on his truck, and his credit tanked. Sienna wanted to sell the place, but if she did, everything would have gone to the creditors. So I stepped in. I formed Bailey Holdings to protect the asset temporarily. I'm helping them flip it under the LLC to recover losses. He said it so smoothly. I almost admired the craft. The details were clean. The motive noble. "I know it looks bad," he said smoothly. But this wasn't about her. It was about doing the right thing. No romance, no secrets, just business. It was a perfect story, logical, layered, almost noble. And part of me wanted to believe it. Because belief is comfortable, and truth is not. But comfort doesn't explain new passwords and $42,000 that vanished. "Show me." I said, "What? The lien?" He unlocked his phone and slid it across the table. A UCC1 filing flashed on screen Mark's truck. Real. Inconvenient. Validating his tale just enough to sting. I leaned back. "So you risked $42,000 to protect a friend's kitchen from creditors?" He chuckled. "You make it sound ridiculous." "It does sound ridiculous. Because you're thinking emotionally again." He said it softly, but it landed like a slap. I folded my arms. And Sienna's remodel posts the marble island, the pendant lights, the caption about the gifted PR rate marketing. He said, "She's trying to make the property more attractive for resale. That's her skill set." The way he framed it was almost artful. Every piece of evidence I gathered now had a plausible alternative meaning, one that made him look thoughtful, generous, misunderstood. Even I could see how the audience, if this were a courtroom or a film, might start to waver. Maybe she overreacted. Maybe he was just helping. But maybe doesn't erase instinct. And mine wouldn't quiet down. That night, while Gavin showered, I opened his laptop. I didn't need to hack anything. The screen was unlocked. The corporate email open. He was careless in the way only the confident can be. I wasn't looking for proof of an affair anymore. I was looking for proof of intent. Buried deep in his downloads folder was a 401k beneficiary update form filed just 2 weeks ago. Beneficiary S. Blake. Relationship other, communications only. Communications only. I stared at those 2 words until the meaning sank in. It wasn't just about money, it was about signaling permanence, trust, and connection outside the marriage, a breadcrumb of a shared future. I scrolled further, checking timestamps, metadata, email headers. The form had been forwarded from his HR rep at Haven West, with an internal note confirming update per your request. G, HR will finalize on Monday. Congrats on the promotion. The same week he told me the company was freezing, raises due to budget. My stomach tightened as I backed out of the folder. A second file caught my eye, an email thread marked External Vendor Communication. The subject line read, Relaunch Timeline plus Post-Nup Plan. I clicked before I could stop myself. The thread was short but damning, from Madeline PR, Madeline Ashaw Media.com to SS, of course, Blakich Bailey Holdings, com, CCG, Rhodes Haven West, com once G is free. We formalized the post-nup and equity split. Let's finalize the talking points for the soft launch campaign before Q4. M, once G, is free. Free. From what, from whom, I scrolled again. The chain ended abruptly, no reply from Gavin. No follow-up, just silence. Like someone had scrubbed it mid-conversation. It didn't matter. The phrasing was enough. The corporate soft launch language, the equity split, the casual mention of a post-nup, all pieces of a plan that didn't include me. The narrative flipped. Gavin wasn't rescuing anyone. He was positioning himself. By the time he stepped out of the shower, wrapped in steam and confidence, I had already forwarded both files' 401k update and email leak to my encrypted drive. He smiled at me. Towel around his shoulders. You okay, fine? I said. Matching his tone perfectly, I was just thinking. Maybe I overreacted. He looked relieved, almost smug. I told you. Evie, it's not what it looks like. No, I said quietly, watching him move around the room. It never is. When he turned away, I looked at the reflection of his phone screen in the mirror, the lock screen glowing with a new notification. Message from Sienna. We're almost there. Can't wait to make it official. The room blurred for a moment. I took a slow breath and steadied myself. This wasn't the ending. It was the midpoint, the half-truth before the collapse. He thought he'd redirected the story. He didn't know I'd already started writing the next chapter. The text came on a Thursday evening, terse and deliberate. Gavin. We're going to Sienna's this weekend. You're going to apologize. I've had enough of this paranoia. I stared at the message, its confidence dripping through the pixels. He thought he'd regained control, turned this into another presentation where he could curate the narrative. But control is only power until someone else has the paperwork. So I replied simply, Evelyn. Of course. Saturday evening arrived sharp and cold. Pacific Heights was washed in that faint gold dusk light, the kind that makes everything look cleaner than it is. I drove alone. Gavin met me there, all calm smiles and tight jawlines, wearing his reasonable husband face. Sienna's home was precisely what I expected, tasteful, expensive, performatively modest. Her husband, Mark, opened the door. His smile was polite but strained, as if he, too, was tired of pretending. Evelyn, Sienna said, stepping forward. Her voice was honey over steel. I appreciate you coming. This has all gotten messy. Yes, I said softly. It has. Gavin placed a hand at my back, guiding me into the living room. Let's just make this quick. Okay, everyone's exhausted. The room looked like a catalog marble countertops. Champagne quartz. Pendant lights humming above the island, the same ones from the invoices I'd printed. Every detail was evidence disguised as decor. Sienna gestured to the seating area. Would you like some wine? No, I said. This won't take long. I set my leather binder on the counter. It was thick, organized, numbered. The sound it made when I placed it down solid. Final made Mark glance up. Sienna hesitated. You didn't need to bring, I smiled faintly. Oh, I insist. I like documentation. The air shifted. Gavin frowned. Evelyn. Please, don't start. I opened the binder. Exhibit 1, I said calmly, sliding the first document forward, the operating agreement for Bailey Holdings, LLC. Filed with the Secretary of State 6 months ago. Members Gavin Rhodes and Sienna Blake. Mark blinked. Sienna's composure flickered, but only slightly. It's not Exhibit 2, I continued, ignoring her. A wire transfer from our joint marital account. $42,000. The memo line reads cabinet deposit, the same amount listed as the capital contribution in your LLC filing. The sound of paper sliding against marble filled the silence. Gavin's jaw tightened. Evelyn. Stop, he said through his teeth. This isn't appropriate. Oh, I agree, I said lightly, flipping to the next page. Exhibit 3, the escrow holdback letter. It states that the final payment will be released only after the influencer partner posts marketing content promoting the renovation. That's an FTC compliance violation, mixing undisclosed sponsorship with private property sales. Sienna's face drained of color. And Exhibit 4. I turned another page. Vendor emails. Invoices submitted under Sienna's PR address, but sent from the corporate email domain belonging to Haven West Development. That's misuse of company resources. Mark stared at her, silent for a moment, then asked quietly, You used Gavin's company account. Sienna's lips parted, but no sound came out. I closed the binder gently, resting my palms on the cover. So, about this apology, I said softly. I owe you one. Gavin's voice rose. Evelyn, no, I said, eyes on Sienna. I'm sorry for making it so easy, for trusting that my husband and his best friend wouldn't turn our marriage into a joint venture. The room went still. You could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the streetlight buzzing outside, the breath catching in Sienna's throat. Mark looked between them. Realization settling in, slow and painful. You both used our names on those filings. Sienna reached out toward him. Mark, listen. He stepped back. You said it was a consulting deal. Gavin snapped. This isn't what it looks like. It looks exactly like what it is, I said quietly. He turned to me, fury breaking through his mask. If you walk out of here without apologizing properly. Evelyn, I swear I'll file for divorce first thing Monday. The threat landed in the air like smoke ugly, fragile, and quickly disappearing. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I smiled. Calm, collected, terrifyingly certain. Then you'd better call your lawyer now, I said, and reached into my bag, from the inner pocket. I took out a sealed envelope, heavy cream stock, embossed with the letterhead of Hart & Quinn, LLP. I placed it on the counter beside the binder. This, I said evenly, is for my firm and for your company's compliance division. It contains copies of every document in that binder, plus one very polite cover letter detailing potential misuse of corporate resources and marital funds. Dated and notarized. Sienna's voice cracked. You wouldn't... I already did, I said softly. But consider this a courtesy visit. I wanted you both to hear it from me first. Mark sank into a chair, staring at nothing. Gavin's hands clenched at his sides, jaw working like he was grinding his own teeth. You've gone too far, he hissed. No, I said. You did. I just brought the receipts. The clock ticked once. Twice. No one spoke. The silence was thick metallic. Electric, the kind that hums right before a storm. Sienna's eyes darted toward the envelope like it might bite. Gavin looked like a man realizing, too late, that the paperwork he ignored was now his undoing. Mark stood slowly. Evelyn, he said, voice low, steady. Do you mind if I keep copies of those exhibits? I met his eyes. I already emailed them to you. He nodded once, a small gesture of something like gratitude or maybe justice. When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit cold against my skin. Behind me, I could still hear raised voices, Gavin's fury, Sienna's panic, Mark's disbelief, but I didn't turn around. Some scenes don't need witnesses, only endings. And this one, for the first time, was on paper. There's a particular satisfaction that comes from patience, the kind that feels almost dignified. Revenge, I decided, would not be a tantrum. It would be paperwork, timing. And the kind of procedural pressure men like Gavin understood, the slow squeeze of systems that did not care about charm. I met Marjorie Quinn the next morning in her office, the light through the frosted glass spreading a steady, impartial warmth across her mahogany desk. She didn't ask for theatrics. She asked for documents. Good. She said when I set the binder down, "We build a case the way you draft a contract, keep it airtight and unemotional." Her instructions were surgical and conservative, the exact opposite of what gossip columnists call drama. But that was the point. I wanted consequences that couldn't be spun away by a smile or a press release. First, we reviewed my prenup. It was a pragmatic document, negotiated before marriage in a coffee-fueled negotiation and signed with more optimism than legal imagination. Buried in Schedule B was a clause most couples never read twice: financial transparency and remedies for undisclosed third-party investments. It was written in dry language material, undisclosed transfers, and remedial freeze authority, but it was there. And Marjorie liked clauses that people assumed they'd never need. She prepared a formal notice invoking that clause, delivered by certified mail and counsel to the bank and to Gavin's attention. The language was deliberate, a request to review and, if necessary, suspend any new HELOCs or joint credit increases pending forensic accounting. Not a threat. A procedural trigger. Next. Marjorie helped me retitle my separate property, my small row house in the Mission that I'd inherited from my grandmother, into a revocable living trust in my name. It was a bureaucratic move dressed as domestic care. The trust shielded the title organized, protected, untouchable. I signed the documents in the firm's conference room, the pen tracing the exact curve that had once signed 1,000 closing statements. When I left. The deed felt heavier in my hand, not because the paper weighed much, but because the world had shifted by the weight of a signature. We then turned to the corporate side. Marjorie drafted an NDA lift request, a formal petition to the compliance office at Haven West, framed as an internal whistleblower disclosure. In it, I described the vendor irregularities, the potential misuse of company channels, and the appearance of undisclosed third-party payments tied to a confidential LLC. I didn't accuse. I documented. The request was routed through the company's safe channel with a request for protected status. Whistleblower protections exist for a reason. Marjorie called the escrow officer, too. We had the contact from the DocuSign email the assistant who'd mistakenly CC'd me. I asked for a professional clarification about the escrow holdback language and whether the release conditions involved marketing deliverables. She read the clause aloud and stammered language requiring an influencer post as a release trigger was. At minimum. Eyebrow raising. We asked the officer to place a temporary administrative hold on the disbursement while they verified certification of completion and compliance with lending guidelines. It was a request framed as due diligence, nothing dramatic, just protocol. Marjorie also drafted a notice of marital waste and an accounting demand. The first asserted that marital assets appeared to have been diverted for non-marital purposes without spousal consent. The second requested a full ledger of expenditures, transfers, and company reimbursements associated with Bailey Holdings, LLC, and any related vendor invoices. Both documents were formal, crisp, and devoid of accusation. They were procedural levers that pulled on different bureaucratic gears. Family courts respond to accounting, banks respond to legal triggers, compliance responds to formal documentation. Throughout. I kept my tone soft in the emails and deliberate in person. In meetings with Tara from HR, I asked benign questions about vendor onboarding, expense approval thresholds phrased as curiosity rather than confrontation. She sent screenshots. I'm so sorry. Evie. She texted later that night. I had no idea how deep this looked. I also preserved every copy, printed and digital. In 3 separate places, a locked cabinet in Marjorie's office, an encrypted cloud folder, and a USB buried in a small safety deposit box I'd opened that week under my trust's name. It felt almost old-fashioned to bury paper. But old-fashioned systems are often the ones designed to survive chaos. The legal moves were clinical, but the emotional strategy was equally intentional. I wanted Gavin to have time to spin, to talk, to call his friends, to rally sympathy, let him posture and explain to people who didn't read deeds and holdbacks. The real pressure would come when multiple institutions banking, corporate compliance, and escrow began to ask the same questions in a legal, toneless voice. 2 days after Marjorie filed the notice, I received the first sign that the machine I'd set in motion had started to work. An email no flourish arrived in my inbox from Redwood Escrow's operations manager, subject administrative hold notification. Bailey Holdings, LLC. We have placed a temporary administrative hold on release of funds pending receipt of completion certifications and further documentation as requested by counsel, simultaneously. My compliance channel pinged back an acknowledgement and an escalation number. They would review my package vendor emails, invoices, and the DocuSign draft under protected status. HR would be copied for potential conflicts of interest. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tara. Her voice was small. Gavin just told me his account flags are showing. He's panicked. Marjorie smiled at me across the desk as if reading my thoughts. Good. Panic is not evidence. Panic is the first stage of procedural risk. That evening, Gavin came home early. He lingered in the doorway with that rehearsed apology, ready words he had practiced in the rearview mirror. The look on his face changed when he saw me calmly going through mail at the counter. He noticed the new official envelopes from the bank, the stamped letters from Marjorie. He read them with the speed of someone watching a slideshow of his own undoing. You didn't have to involve them, he said, voice low, incredulous. This is overkill. It's not overkill to protect what's mine, I replied. My voice was quiet but steady. You made choices. I'm making sure they have proper accounting. He swallowed. Promise me you'll talk. Let's work this out before it gets institutional. I promise to be fair, I said. I'm still keeping that promise. But fairness requires transparency. He searched my face for the woman he used to know, the one who would plead private forgiveness, instead. He found a lawyerly calm he'd never appreciated before. I wasn't cold. I was exact. That precision cuts deeper than shouting. When he left that night for a client dinner, an attempt, perhaps, to call allies I didn't follow, I sat at my kitchen table, the documents laid out like a map, in the glow of the lamp. The lines read clearly ledger entries, wire memos, vendor emails, permit numbers. The revenge I'd prepared was not about spectacle. It was about systems and systems, once engaged, move with an impartial, inexorable force, outside. The city blinked and carried on, oblivious, inside. A quiet army of paperwork had begun to march. There's a particular kind of silence that happens when consequences start landing not loud, not cinematic, but deep. The kind that hums in boardrooms, inboxes, and courthouse hallways. Mine arrived on a Tuesday morning, with a series of emails that sounded like small detonations. The first blow landed at Haven West. At 9:07 a.m., Tara texted one word, now. I refreshed my inbox. A message from corporate compliance sat at the top. Subject notice of investigation, vendor relationship review, effective immediately. All vendor contracts linked to Bailey Holdings LLC and Sienna Blake PR have been suspended pending review for conflict of interest and potential misappropriation. By noon, word had spread through the company grapevine. Sienna's PR firm, once their star contractor, was quietly scrubbed from the vendor list. Gavin's access badge deactivated that afternoon. Administrative leave pending investigation. Official language for corporate exile. Tara later called to whisper. They pulled the server logs. Evie. His corporate email was forwarding invoices to Sienna's address. Compliance found the domain link you flagged. I thanked her, though my tone wasn't triumphant. It wasn't joy I felt. It was closure, like a gate finally locking behind a storm. The second blow came from real estate itself. Redwood Escrow's compliance officer called the next day. The holdback clause had raised eyebrows all the way up to the lender. FTC disclosure rules, HOA violations, unreported renovations. A week later. The HOA board issued an official notice of non-compliance, unauthorized after-hours construction, unapproved design modifications, and failure to obtain completion certification, fines stacked up like dominoes. The escrow funds, nearly $38,000, were frozen indefinitely. Contractors demanded payment. Sienna, once the polished PR queen of gifted collabs, now faced invoices and a lien on her marble island. The gossip circle moved faster than the mail. Word spread in quiet luxury communities the way rot spreads under paint. The woman who built her image on perfection was suddenly whispered about over Mimosa's FTC breach. Escrow holdback. Influencer investigation. Mark, her husband, filed for legal separation the following Monday. The official caused financial deceit and breach of trust. His attorney was Quinn and Hart, Marjorie's firm. The third blow was personal, precise, and perfectly timed. Friday evening. I waited for Gavin in the same living room where this all began, the one he thought he owned, the one my trust now protected. When he arrived. His suit looked deflated. He walked in, suit deflated, words rehearsed. They're overreacting, he began. I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. No binder this time, just clean. Concise documentation. Notice of separation, forensic accounting summary. Proposed mediation agreement. I drafted it with Marjorie that morning. Gavin would reimburse the marital waste every dollar tied to Bailey. The business loan, the PR fees, in exchange. I'd sign a mutual non-disparagement NDA. No interviews, no public fallout, no spectacle, just truth sealed in legal quiet. He read the first page, color draining from his face. You're divorcing me. I'm formalizing what you already dissolved, I said gently. The only difference is mine has a notary. He looked up, desperate. Please, don't do this. I can make it right. I slid a second document forward, the quitclaim deed, the one he'd signed last year during our refinance. Too busy to read the fine print? This transfers your interest in the property to me. Remember, I said, my tone mild. You told me. Just handle it. Evie, you know the paperwork better than I do. So I did. He stared at his signature, small and undeniable. You taught me, I added quietly, to read every contract twice. A pause. I just did. Something inside him deflated, the arrogance unspooling into something smaller regret. Maybe. He stood there, eyes unfocused, like a man watching the tide pull away everything he'd assumed was stable. You can stay in the guest room tonight, I said. After that, my attorney will coordinate retrieval of your things. You'll get your settlement schedule by Monday. He didn't argue. He just nodded once and walked upstairs, a man hollowed out by his own paperwork. The aftermath moved quickly. Haven West issued a statement 2 weeks later. An internal review found procedural misconduct. The involved employees have been released. Gavin's name wasn't listed, but everyone knew. Sienna's PR firm lost 2 major clients the same week. Citing compliance uncertainty, her sponsorship deals vanished faster than her curated Instagram captions. Mark's legal separation filing made it to the county register public record. Factual. Impossible to spin. And I, Evelyn Hart, once the quiet paralegal who organized other people's trusts, found my own name on documents that represented survival, not submission. Marjorie raised her glass at our next meeting. You didn't destroy him, she said. You just let the systems he built destroy themselves. I smiled faintly. Revenge works best when it reads like policy. The house was silent again that night, the trust deed framed on my desk beside a copy of the settlement. I sat there with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the city lights blink through the fog, in the distance. The ferry building clock struck 9, somewhere across town. Sienna was probably drafting a public statement. Gavin was likely rehearsing an apology for HR he'd never get to deliver. And me, I wasn't celebrating. I was documenting because that's what I do. I keep records. The difference now is that every record in my life bears one name only. Mine. There's a silence that follows justice, not the tense kind that precedes revelation, but the soft, breathable kind that hums with completion. That's the silence my home carried now. A month had passed since the settlement was signed. Gavin had moved out quietly, leaving behind only things too heavy to carry or too tainted to want back. His key didn't work anymore. His name didn't, either. I'd repainted the living room in a pale sage color that caught the morning light, differently warmer, forgiving, but firm. The marble counter that had once been a battleground of accusations now held a vase of fresh eucalyptus and a single framed photo of my grandmother, smiling in front of the same house decades ago. The walls no longer bore the curated art Gavin had picked for resale value. I replaced them with canvases by local artists, small works from a weekend market at the marina, imperfect, unframed, but honest. On the first Saturday in May, I joined a legal clinic helping women read the contracts that once trapped them. The sign on the corkboard read, "Know your clauses, keep your power." I smiled when I pinned up my workshop outline. No fury like a woman with documentation. It became our quiet motto. A joke that made the other volunteers grin, but one every woman in that room understood. A few weeks later, as the fog rolled in from the bay, I got an unexpected message. From Mark Blake. Subject: You might want this. I hesitated before opening it. Attached was a note polite, measured, the tone of a man who'd been scorched but decided to walk through the smoke anyway. Found something while cleaning Sienna's office. You deserve to see it before anyone else does. USB enclosed in this email was in her locked drawer. The package arrived the next morning by courier, a plain brown envelope, no return label. Inside was a small silver USB drive. Curiosity is a dangerous kind of courage. I plugged it in. The first folder was labeled Post-Nup Outline, Draft V3, inside a PDF draft titled Rhodes-Blake Postnuptial Strategy. My stomach tightened as I read the first paragraph. It was a legal proposal and agreement drafted between Gavin Rhodes and Sienna Blake, outlining their plan to formalize partnership and consolidate equity in Gavin's company following marital dissolution. Paragraph 3 made my breath still. Upon finalization of the divorce, parties will execute joint PR campaign to reposition narrative emphasizing professional collaboration evolving into personal partnership. Objective: restore public goodwill and brand continuity. There was more. A pitch deck labeled Soft Launch Narrative. It detailed photos, captions, hashtags, even quotes for a lifestyle magazine feature. One slide read, Timing recommendation within 6 to 8 weeks post-divorce filing. Coordinate with publication under exclusivity clause. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, the irony sharp enough to sting, so the investment had never been friendship. It was groundwork, a calculated alignment of romance and reputation. Drafted in bullet points and brand tone, I scrolled through the final slide, and there it was, the phrase Bailey Home Project, symbol of renewal. It wasn't a house, it was a marketing set. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Then I closed the file, ejected the drive, and placed it in a small evidence envelope I kept in my desk drawer. My first instinct was to send it straight to compliance, but then I stopped. They'd get it soon enough, one way or another. Instead, I emailed Mark back, received, "Thank you for your integrity. Some truths reveal themselves on their own timeline." He replied within minutes, "Maybe, but you lit the match." That night, I walked out into the small balcony overlooking the bay. The wind smelled of salt and asphalt, of endings and clean starts. In the distance, city lights flickered thousands of windows glowing over lives full of secrets, settlements, and small victories. I thought about everything that had unfolded as folders, the evidence, the signatures that changed entire futures. Women like me don't get cinematic revenge. We get paperwork notarized, time-stamped, irrefutable. We don't shout to be heard. We file. We don't bow for truth. We bow out with documentation. The next morning, my inbox pinged. A familiar sender, Compliance Division, Haven West Corporate. Subject: Inquiry Request. Confidential Ms. Quinales. Yes, Hart. Please be advised that a federal inquiry has requested access to the documentation you provided under the Protected Disclosure Program. Kindly confirm availability for follow-up correspondence. No headline, no drama, just procedure the kind that moves quietly but carries weight. I leaned back in my chair, watching the cursor blink. Somewhere out there. The paper trail I started was still working, still unraveling lies in rooms I'd never enter. Justice. I've learned. Doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like follow-up email chains and case numbers that start quietly but end loudly. I walked to the window, coffee in hand, and let the morning sun pour across the hardwood floor. The house was finally mine, legally, emotionally, architecturally, every wall repainted, every frame replaced. I didn't need to burn it all down. I'd simply rewritten it clause by clause. And as the clock chimed 9, I smiled, whispering the same words I'd once said to Gavin, but this time to no one in particular, just to the air that finally felt like mine. read every contract twice. If you were in Evelyn's position, would you choose forgiveness or exposure? Comment below. And subscribe for the next chapter. The post-nup pitch, because sometimes the sequel to a love story isn't romance. It's discovery.